Thank you all for coming tonight. The BASS dialogues are made possible with generous support from the Art Bridges Foundation Access for All program, and of course made possible by Kennedy Yanko, so generously joining us tonight. I'm Tom Healy. Welcome. I want to begin with a brief personal note, because several people here know that my beloved older brother died very unexpectedly yesterday. He and I were very close, Irish twins born just 11 months apart. Among many things, Joe Healy was an expert metal worker. He taught me how to weld, how to scavenge metal, how to cut up a car for demolition derby. So being here tonight with Kennedy to talk about her work that takes metal and gives it tension, form, even a kind of life, feels especially meaningful to me and an honor to my brother's memory. It also reminds me that art at its best doesn't separate making from living or from material from spirit. It holds them together even when we can't. I'm sorry to bring my personal grief here, but my favorite poet, Rilke, once wrote that death brings us into a more complete presence with what is here and alive. And I think there's something in Kennedy's work that does the same. Plus, my brother, Kennedy, me, and I'm sure most of you here too, are from the workers. We show up. So I'm excited for this conversation because Kennedy's sculptures often feel less like objects than like events, forms that seem caught in the act of becoming. They ask us to think not only about what materials are, but about what they remember and about what it means to encounter artwork with our own bodies. Tonight, I hope we can all talk with Kennedy about the intelligence of materials, the physicality of making, and the emotional and philosophical stakes of abstraction. In talking with Kennedy, she has made me bone up a lot on my philosophy. We'll also talk a little bit about Kennedy in Miami because I know she loves Miami. So Kennedy, I don't know if you've ever done demolition derby, but you've grown up between very different worlds: Caribbean heritage, the great state of Brooklyn, the disciplined environment, SUNY Purchase. And before sculpture, your life moved through theater, yoga, bodybuilding. Could you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how we got here?
Well, first, I want to thank you so much, Tom, for coming here and doing this. And you know, I think what you said about bringing your personal into this is that making art is so much about the personal and being able to transmute it and experience the things that we deal with. So it means a world to me for you coming. Thank you so much. And I want to thank all you guys for coming out today. It's so lovely to have you here and to take time to share my practice and my work with me. So my upbringing, I grew up in St. Louis, and you know, painting was always something that I loved to do. It moved me, it cleared me, and it allowed me to be and to make everything feel kind of even and balanced. And so from a very young age, I started making work and showing work, and it just really became, you know, who I am and what I do. So, you know, that's where I started, and I'm here now in Miami.
I was wondering also about the immense physical discipline, because there's such an intense physicality to your work: lifting, bending, welding, stretching. I was wondering how those feel to you. They almost seem to me, when I see your work, as a kind of choreography.
Well, I think that for me, understanding work, you know, the body has always been a primary tool for me to understand the world around me. And that choreography for me, this kind of the movement that I'm using and that I'm working for, is usually responsive to what's in front of me. So my background is in Qigong and yoga and movement, but when I left school, I went to the San Francisco Art Institute for a year, and I moved to New York, and I started working and living at this place called the Living Theater. And in that place, I learned a lot about the power of invocation as a creative person, how important it is to look inside yourself to understand things and understand the world around you. Something has to conjure within in order to come outside. And that was a choreography in itself. And I think just as a painter, you know, I've always been kind of an action painter. So much of my practice is responsive and is about seeing what's in front of me and being able to help articulate it in a way that feels more cohesive or comprehensive and as a whole. As a painter, in 2009, I did a show which was called Wu Wei, which means to allow in Chinese. And I was pouring onto canvas and getting these really beautiful kind of fractal-like details from the way the paint would interact with itself. And very quickly after that show, I thought, oh, it would be wonderful to take paint off the canvas. So I started removing paint from the canvas, and I started creating paint skins, which are hundreds of gallons of paint that are dried and then become somewhat of an organism and something for me to manipulate. So I started working like that in 2010, just making pure paint, hanging it from the ceiling, from the walls, installing it in little glass things, just really thinking about what it means to bring paint into the 3D. And then it became a sculptural tool that could be layered and whittled and shaped and molded. So, paint really being almost my dance partner.
Yes.
In this work.
It's something I can't imagine what that first moment was when you really felt you were going to pick up the paint and take it into another form.
I couldn't either. I thought about it for a year. I was like, how am I going to do this? Just that show was so much, just going in that room, I just thought, wow, it'd be great to do this. And, I think after 20 years of working, it's so cool to understand that once an idea initiates itself, like you kind of just have to align with it in some way eventually and wait for it in some capacity. And when I first did my first pour, I was just, it worked. It was kind of miraculous to me.
Yeah. So the other part of the painting is the metal and the sculpture. And let's talk about the way you've hunted for that metal types of materials. You've said that it's like going on a date to go looking for them, and then that a good day of driving is just a perfect day for you to go and find. So tell me about your type.
Yeah, my type. Oh, God. Unfortunately, I'm very complicated. I think hunt is a perfect term for it. And as an action painter, adrenaline is something that I enjoy and I respond really well to. And as a sculptor, adrenaline doesn't come the same way. Sculpture is so much about logistics and timing and planning and a million different things coming together to coalesce to create this moment in time. So I really get that kind of immediacy when I'm in the metal yard. And I'm not sure if you guys have been to a metal yard before, but it's typically, so you've seen it. It's like walking into the apocalypse. There's a 30-foot tall, high pile of metal, and there's magnets swinging it through the air, and there's people throwing off the back of the truck. And so it's really exciting, but there's also a million things happening at once. So I'm having to, one, make sure my body is safe, but two, and pay attention to everything around me, making sure I'm having eye contact with everyone. But it's like treasure hunting, so I'm picking through the piles and I'm looking for colors, I'm looking for textures, and I don't really know exactly what I have until I get back to my studio, and that's when I spend time kind of arranging things on the floor, and I'm really approaching metal almost as a form of collage, in the same way that an artist would go to their store and find the canvas. That's what I'm doing there, except when I'm working at scale, I have a lot more agency over the colors. I'm often painting larger objects like a shipping container, or for a show I did called Humming on Life in 2023, I painted a 20-foot water barrel and then fire cut that into different pieces. And so, I'm kind of at the whim of whatever is in front of me.
One of the things that is so moving to me about your work, how beautiful it is because it feels so precariously balanced at times. How much are you looking for that instability, that feeling of that when you're there with the work or when audiences approach it?
I don't know if I'm necessarily looking for the stability. I think what I'm always looking for and hoping for is a sense of levity and a sense of reaching and expansion. I mean, every piece is so different, though. Every piece has a different personality and different characteristics. They're all asking for something different. I think when I'm looking for scale, I want that expression and that explosion. But what tends to happen is that, I'm making these compositions and I'm laying everything out and kind of figuring out how it goes, and then the skin is asked to go into these different places that are there, and then there's shelves there, there's a space here, it's like asking for this, and I'm still using paint as I would with a brush. It's still a mark making tool for me and a material for me in that way. I might have an idea of what I want something to look like, which is totally takes me on a different experience. Maybe I want it to go this way, and then it's like takes me this way and that way and that way. So I'm always kind of doing with what's in front of me.
I'm curious if in your head, you're ever in conversation with Eva Hesse, because she deliberately looked for materials that were impermanent and the art might just disappear, which you work with materials that are very solid.
Mm-hmm. So I did a conversation on Ursula von Radinsvard's work a few weeks ago in New York that Brooke Kamen Rappaport put together. And one of the questions was, what would be your dream show to do? And I said I would love to put Anne Truitt and Eva Hesse together. I think about both of those artists somehow as painters that are making sculpture as well. Like they're really thinking compositionally as painters and materialists. But also as artists who are really using their biography as an opportunity to expand on what the life experience that's transmuted into the work, and why and how that sensation is captured within materiality, within labor, within repetition. Eva, she's such an important voice. Her journals, there's an amazing documentary on Eva's work as well. But really the artists that I'm very interested in are artists that are pushing materialists, Mark Bradford, Anselm Kiefer, Leonardo Drew, Hugo MacLeod, people who are like really changing what it is that you understand that you're looking at in a proficient way. That's like what I care about, and Eva was at the forefront of that.
There are two other artists I've been thinking about, not among those, and we'll talk about some of those too, but Lee Bonteque described welding as a kind of drawing. And I'm curious if your experience with steel has any of that feeling too. And then I was thinking about Linda Benklis, who, when she started pouring material directly on the floor, somewhat like her skins, she let gravity take over, so she was not fully in control. And how much do you need to be in control, or do you follow the lead of the material?
Well, I love what Lee was saying about drawing and sculpture, and in 2017, I started kind of tracing the shadows of my sculptures on the wall just with a pencil, just thinking about these kind of organisms that are living behind them. So I started creating shadow perspectives, and in a lot of the work you guys see up there, sometimes you'll see these expanded paintings into the space in the installation, or you'll see a line that's moving through the work. And for so long, I was looking for a line in my work, an invisible line in my work. So I was playing with glass and with resin, and like, how can there are no lines there? Everything is like this. So I then found Fred Sandbeck's work, who's one of my favorite artists and a brilliant sculptor. And Fred's work is basically, I think there's a slide up there, one string from the ceiling to the floor here, one string from the ceiling to the floor here. And when you walk past it, it feels like there's a wall that's been created to the left of you. And that's your proprioception. That's how your mind and your body respond to how it is in space. And so that was really interesting to me. I liked the idea of framing the work. But what's really come up for me more recently in the past couple years is this idea of like, what does it mean to draw three-dimensionally in space? At my show Retro Future that I did at Jeannie Greenberg, Salon 94 in New York, I'd kind of started thinking through that work. So what do these lines look like? I was finding all these like lines and piping and kind of straight things. And it just felt like drawing in the three dimension. And the person that really came up for me around that was Cy Twombly, was his really fun gestural wrists and that kind of movement and that playfulness. And I'm working on a couple of different bodies of work like that right now. So it's been a really fun investigation the last few years.
That brings up this interesting question about how you seem kind of joyfully in conversation with other artists. You know, there's always that talk of the artist has to kind of kill the predecessor to show this is progress and this is me, and that's so not your approach.
I mean, you can kill him with kindness. I mean, I don't know. I kind of feel that way, though. I'm definitely fighting every day. I'm battling every day. But, one of the things that I always feel no matter what is that every artist has their DNA, and it's so palpable in everything that you do.
You actually brought some of them, you did this gorgeous show at Salon 94 last year that you called Metal and Memory. And Leonardo Drew, Suzanne Jackson, Frank Stella, and John Chamberlain were there. Let's talk for a second and get John Chamberlain out of the way, because people often reach for Chamberlain when they first encounter your work. They see salvaged metal and gestural abstraction. The way I see it, Chamberlain's work involves violence, collision, and compression. It's sort of force that was already spent and the world gets squeezed and frozen into something. And whereas your work feels suspended to me. It's still negotiating what it's going to be, what it is to us. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. But I think that's just our personalities. I think that's a reflection of who we are inside. And I think you said it right. I am playful. I do find so much joy and so much expansion and so much understanding about, who I am through making. And yeah, that's how I'm feeling when I'm doing it.
I tell you, wow, you see that joy if you go to Kenny's studio. It's alive. Well, there also, tell us about the plants. You have a huge selection of plants.
Yeah, that's been nice making being in Miami has been, Miami was always the goal for me. I grew up in St. Louis. My brother is actually here and my niece is here. I'm so happy to have them. But I grew up in St. Louis, and I started coming to Miami when I was 18, and I just fell in love with it here. The air, the water, it's always been a place where I can kind of regenerate a bit, and having as much space as I have here now, and just be more comfortable. New York is really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. It's really hard to make sculpture. It's really hard to get to Home Depot. It's really hard to, to pay for anything. It just makes it hard. And Miami, I think, is an incredible place to produce and to foster creativity. And there's just a lot of psychic air and energy here. It's really a portal. So the garden has been wonderful. We've got this great guy, John, who's been working with us at the studio, and he had a green thumb, and I was like, well, let's do plants, and let's eat from here. We've got a greenhouse in there, and there's a lot of life in the studio. I think not just in the things that we're growing on the walls, but outside, and my studio manager, Lauda, is here. She's been amazing, and we're all just... I think part of making art is also the culture around it, the lifestyle around it, is going to the studio every day, whether something happens or not, and building with people that you love, who are engaged with the work as much, if not more than you are, and push you forward. It's a dream and a blessing to get to do this every day. And I think the studio is just kind of it's like Disney World. It's just a reflection of that and what we're trying to build there.
That spirit of yours is very contagious. Every time I come, I feel like I'm being nurtured right there. But so, if you ever play hooky in Miami, what's a day like outside the studio?
Oh, like a dream day, or just like what I really do? I love to be in the water, so paddleboarding, checking out the dolphins in the bay is awesome. Honestly, just going on walks here. I just love that if I wake up at 3 a.m., I can just step outside, go on a walk. The moon is out up until 8 a.m. Just being active and seeing my friends and reading and hanging out with my cat. And, I think that being here, my friend was just visiting, she's been in New York, and when you're in New York, you're really dealing with life in a way that you can't be open and embodied. And in Miami, you can really be in your body, you can really kind of be open and feel in a different way, other than, trying to get on the subway and dealing with everybody and all those things. So I feel so welcomed in my body here. And one of the things that I was most excited about in coming here was really being able to receive, and I really believe that creating comes when you're held. I think, everyone's like, oh, pain is when I make great work when I'm in pain. I can do so much there. But amazing things happen, when I'm resting and when I'm playing.
It's only been 5 years, really, since you were in residency at the Rebels.
5 years.
Isn't that amazing?
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. But right there was a shift in scale for you. And so it's interesting to hear, I've sensed with so much of your work that, and even some very new work where the intimacy is right there. There's some of these works are very small, but you have gotten monumental in some cases, and you have some work that almost seems like sculpture and architecture together. So how is that sense of scale and intimacy? How do they struggle within you, or what happens?
Well, I'll backtrack a little bit because, the 1 year that I was at school, which was at the San Francisco Art Institute, I was minoring in painting, majoring in art and history, but I found a class called New Genres, which was all installation work. So it was artists like Anne Hamilton and Ophir Eliason, and artists who were really building these immersive environments and these spaces that would penetrate you immediately. So I'm often kind of leaning on the language of the light and space artists because I'm very interested in like a physical consciousness. And for me, getting to scale was always something that I wanted, but it wasn't just about space. It was also about that immediacy through the viewer. Like when you sit in a James Turrell room, you see the light through your skin. You see it through a different kind of lens, and it's unavoidable. And I think that's a conversation I'm really interested in with my making and with engaging with an audience, is like how to imbue that into someone or pull it from myself into a medium. And the opportunity to work with the Rubels was just incredible. It was so special for me because they really, they were like, oh, you want a truck? You got 10,000 square, like, what do you want? How do we facilitate your dreams? And I was able to really work in a way that was immediate and responsive. And I think, like, to me, that's what success is. Like, really, as an artist, success is to be able to make what you want, when you want, with who you want, how you want to do it, and be able to respond, like, with the immediacy of it, So to see the work soar and get to experience it like that was so special for me. And the beginning of me feeling like, oh, this is who I want to be. This is who I've been trying to be. And I get to see it in real time, while I'm alive.
Well, even titles of those three works are about you. It's like, I am water, I am flower, I am that, right? And it's kind of just the opposite of what you'd expect these monumental floating pieces to be. Can you talk about that?
Of course.
And titling generally?
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
have such cool titles.
Oh, thank you so much. The I am isn't necessarily about me, it's about my connection to all things. And I have kind of an ontological commitment to atomism, which is the idea that, I believe that all things are humming in nature and in life and in being. So everything is alive and nothing is different. So that my constitution is no different than a flower or from the water or from the metal that I'm working with. It's a same thing. And I think that for that particular show, I really wanted to emphasize, the relationship there atomically. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of always how I'm looking at it. I'm really interested in repositioning metal as something that's excavated from the ground, something that came from nature, something that isn't necessarily man-made, because those are our initial connotations with it, where it's like, oh, this came from, some workers, some people working and making, but it really came from the ground. And I think that's also just like where I naturally lean, is playing with perception. You don't know it's paint. You don't know that people think it's leather, or they think it's metal, or they think it's like something else, but it's pure paint. So it's that idea of being able to challenge what you understand in the immediate moment, just like Fred Sandbeck does, and have to stop and question how my brain is working and responding to this. There's a great book by Eric Kant called Reductionism in Art and Brain Science and Art. I can't remember the name exactly. But he really talks about the conditioning of our eyes, and how so many of the things that we understand, like even just needing to find figuration with an abstraction, is somewhat of a survival method, because I'm trying to place it, I'm trying to understand it so that I can be with it. And I think the power of abstraction and the power of color is that I can be with it and I can let it take me somewhere new. I can learn something new about either myself or my relationship to it, or just go on a ride. And I mean, I think that that's like philosophically what I'm always interested in animating in my practice and in my life, which is just like kind of every day can be a new discovery. You know, every moment, every person you meet, there's so many different things that you don't know and you can't name and understand. So, yeah.
So tell us a little more about the abstraction, because I'm fascinated how portraiture emerges from your abstraction, certainly with some titles, and certainly seems some homage or conversation with a number of artists you love, and particularly the salient queens of that. Can you talk about that tension between, or maybe it's just a conjunction between abstraction and personality in portraiture?
Well, I mean, each of the shows is so interesting to look at. So Salient Queens, which was a show, basically what I call non-representational portraiture of the feminine energies in my life that have shown me how to take up space. And each of those pieces had some kind of reflective energy that all of those people would offer, you know. And then, you know, Post-Capitalist Desire was dealing with ideas on desire and industry and kind of the malleability of the mind and how so many things are chosen for us. And you could really feel that tension of the human desire in engagement with systematic industry, and kind of like this weird tension there. Or if you look at something like Intimacy of Throws, which looks like the Rodin, the Burger of Cassis. And so for me, I think it is amazing. I don't know how it happens. But what I tell myself and what I want to believe is that it has to do with what I'm thinking about. So Intimacy of Throws was about what happens within intimacy, through pain, through challenge. That's when you connect with others. And the piece itself, it was the very first piece I did here in Miami in my studio. It was a large-scale installation that we actually had at Meridians here on the beach, and it really looked like a family of pieces together. And that, you know, that was the original site of challenge, is within the family, within the home. And also at a time when in my life, you know, where I'm thinking about family and I'm thinking about building that, and all of these different intricacies, and then also just what intimacy means today in 2026. So these are things that I'm chewing on, that I'm thinking about, and people are always saying like, oh, it looks like a figure or the body. I'm not trying to create the body, but my, you know, lifetime of research has been in the physical, energetic, and etheric body. Like, these are the things that I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about movement and form and psychology and philosophy and the human condition and experience. And I think because I'm so ingrained in that just naturally kind of comes into what I'm working on.
That work, remember when we were looking inside, and I said, oh my God, Rodin, and we
That was crazy.
it was crazy.
But great.
But it's not, what's strange about that work, it's so compelling and is like Rodin in that particular piece, they're moving. You know, they have been traveling and showing up at the gates, and they're broken people, but they're together. You know, and you feel that sculpture's not static of yours, it's moving. And that happens somehow with, it's not this way, it happens with the color and the shape and things as well. It's not.
Yeah, that's important to me. And for me, that's always the goal, is to, you know, you walk into the Mark Rothko Chapel and the room it hums because of the color, because of the light. It is alive and it's breathing. And I mean, that's always the goal, is to really kind of invoke that sense of life. But again, like I tell myself, is because that I'm thinking about it as something that is alive. I'm thinking about it that something it's a part of matter. And Jack Whitten, I think, explains that in such a beautiful way. I mean, the way he incorporates science and biology and biography into materiality and the language around his visual language is just masterful.
Yes, those notebooks of his, incredible.
Oh my God.
Right?
Notes from the Woodshed. And you can just get a couple copies, put them around the house, pick them up. I mean, wow, I think one of the most brilliant artists of
I agree.
Forever.
Yeah.
I mean, master painter.
I want to ask you about Paris, because we were talking about architecture. Can you tell us about your project a little bit without giving away?
Can I? I don't know. I'm still working on it, but it's...
Okay, so don't, if you don't want to.
Something for Paris is exciting. I'm also getting ready for the Venice Biennial.
Yes, I wanted to ask you
Yeah,
about
we're going to be
Venice.
going next week to install. I've made some very exciting work for that, and it's such a special biennial honoring the voice and the ideas of Koyo Kuyo, who was a brilliant curator from South Africa. And the theme of the biennial this year is in a minor key. And it's all about the invisible, the overlooked, the misunderstood, and the elevation of those voices. And my work has always been strangely kind of placed in outsider art. When I first started showing, I was showing with like Thornton Dial and a lot of these guys.
Really?
Yeah, it's so funny. They didn't know what to do with me. But I just feel like painting is the thing that really moves me the most, though, because I'm approaching sculpture as a painter, so there's a different gesture there. And it's so responsive and it's so intuitive. There's not drawings unless I absolutely have to for like the city or something. And I think that's such a different approach than a typical sculptor would move forward with,
So speaking of that, you did a project at Pace Prints with what you described as two extraordinary women who kind of ran the place and things. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was, working with paper and paint?
Yeah, oh my gosh, it just blew me open. I really paint paper. So the process of paper pulp is really fascinating. At Pace Prints in the city, they have a master studio. It's directed by Rachel Gladfelder, and there's many other artists there that are amazing to work with. So entering into an entirely new medium really kind of got me back into painting, and I hadn't been painting for a while, so there's so many technical processes. We were doing these wild explosions of paper pulp and all this different, texturizing and pressing and pulling and building shapes, and it's been such a dream to kind of get back into that action painting. I don't have that anymore.
I would have loved to see some video of that, because the way you talk about it is very much action painting.
I'll send you one.
Oh, you do have? Oh, wow.
I'll see if I can
Lucky
do it
me.
now. Yeah.
All right, awesome. I also want to talk about the color black. You had a number of unbelievable works in your studio right now that you're working on, and they were just mesmerizing.
Thank you. Yeah, the black works are really special. I started actually the same year that I did the Rubel residency. Kavi Gupta had a part of his, what is it called, at the fair? Booth. I would have woke up at 2 a.m. like, booth! Yeah, he had some of my first black works that I started working on, and it's black skins on black metal. And I was really interested in kind of that really integration of a singularity and something that's really moving and has this different kind of form. And then I was like, let me go fight Anish Kapoor and see if I can do something a little bit darker, a little bit deeper. He invented a black that no one's allowed to use. What's it called? Does anybody know the name of it?
The color, I forgot.
What is it? Yeah, that one.
Right.
And so I started using a new technique called flocking. So I'm flocking the skins, and it gets this really muted, dark black, and it looks like you're looking into space. And black has so many colors in it and so many facets to it. So I'm working on a new collection from this kind of drawing, the drawing in the 3D where you have to get so close to see what the color is. And so when I'm approaching a lot of my sculptures in general, the way that I'm choosing the skins and the colors of it are what are the undertones that I'm finding in the rest of the metal or underneath the colors that are there, and kind of helping to bring them out to, articulate it to a really full natural gesture.
Everything in my power to do to not touch that flocking. It's so seductive. Yeah, really good. The other thing that I noticed, partly because looking at in the studio, both the scale, large and small, even the largest works have all this minute attention to them. They don't just happen. There's all kinds of twisting and shaving and doing things to them that, how do you know when they're done?
That's a hard one. I mean, it's like, how do you know when you're ready to walk out the door? It's like you do the things that you do and you know how to do it. But they sing, they identify themselves, they present themselves. I'm here, it's perfect. It's when you know it's perfect.
Don't touch me anymore.
Don't touch me anymore. And the thing about it is, like, all those little nuances, like sometimes the smallest little thing, you put a little tendril at the top and it raises it like 8 feet taller. All of those little moments are, I think, really what give the work power, and movement and that levity. And sometimes I'll just destroy them and redo them too, Yeah, I've had stuff in my studio for years where I'll just keep ripping it up and putting it back together.
With writing, it's the same. You put it in a drawer.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you'll find something in it, sometimes you'll cross it all out, but often you just need to leave it there for a while. Yeah. So one of the many people we've talked about, artists who you're in conversation with, a lot of it's philosophical. So can you talk about Hilda Klimt and how that's how you've been really taken with her?
Yeah, I mean, talk about discipline and consistency and fervor. I mean, Hilma was someone that I really needed to call upon because I wanted to talk about the metaphysical and I wanted to talk about the occult. And, I kept getting pulled in these conversations about race and identity and sexuality and all this stuff. And yes, I exist here, but I was so fascinated by and really educated by my curiosities of the invisible world and the things that we don't understand or know or can name. And I mean, Hilma is the mother of abstraction.
Yeah. I'll never forget walking into the Guggenheim to see that show.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I mean, talk about poetry, talk about that fluid kind of composition and delicacy and imbuing it with these ideas of humanness. I mean, Hilma's just someone that I reference all the time, that I go back to, that I appreciate so much. And also the restraint, just like the artistic restraint. No one can see this work until 25 years after my death.
Right after my death. Wow.
Come on. What are we talking about?
Well, she certainly believed she would still, in a way, be there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So she could wait for eternity in some ways.
She could, and I mean, everything about that particular time, to the turn of the century, the theosophical movement, the spiritualist movement, everything all those conversations that were happening at that time were just, I mean, they really kind of opened a portal into a new way of being and making art.
How open do you feel the art world is to this kind of thinking? I would say 10 years ago, zero.
I think the Hilma show broke it open, and I think that the pandemic allowed people to ask more questions about what matters to them and to be more open to what they would call woo-woo or not sure of or conspirator or false. I think like now more than ever, I think we understand what we imagine we create, and what we are is what's in front of us. And in the art world, a lot of it is so steeped and grounded in art history. And the surrealists were really the ones who I think were practicing these kind of automatistic practices of getting in the body, water deprivation, food deprivation, like Sufi practices, these things to kind of connect to other parts of one's consciousness. Yeah, I mean, I think it can be scary for people to talk about what they don't know. But I think now is just a great time. I think a lot more people are open and willing to ask questions about what they don't know, what they don't understand, willing to go to places inside themselves that they may have not been open to before. It's such a fascinating time as we watch this kind of rise in technological intelligence, and I'm so curious to see if our personal effort towards our consciousness raising also goes in parallel to that.
Right, there's that new show that just opened at the New Museum about what it is to be human, and 150 different artists taking that on. So, speaking of questions, I'm sure there are questions here in the audience. And while people do, I heard Simone Lee say that, it was really hard, but she'd resist the pressure to kind of explain everything about her work to audiences. What's your feeling about engaging with audience? Not to make you afraid of asking questions.
No. I mean, I love hearing that, and I think there just comes a moment where you're like, I'm just gonna stop translating, and in promising myself that I know that the people who are drawn to this, are curious about this, who also relate and understand this on a different level will come, and then it's almost like I think it's a great filter, actually.
Love your work.
Thank you.
Had an opportunity to see it at the studio at Art Basel last year, and I was fascinated to see the juxtaposition of the sculptures with paintings. We just love to hear you kind of elaborate upon the relationship and how that evolves and what comes first and how it changes over time.
Thank you. That's a great question. I mean, I consider these paintings. You know, I still call them paintings, and I think just when I talk about my approach to it, again, it's kind of like how I'm picking the colors, how the compositions are coming about. You know, even just the placement of the skins itself is making a mark in the same way that I would with my brush, but I'm using my body to apply the paint. So yeah, it's painting in the 3D. And I think that that's maybe the best way I could put it. Thank you for that question. Oh, the historical paintings. Is that what you're talking about? Oh, okay. Yeah. They're all different. I mean, you know, the Napoleon one was it's kind of a funny story, actually. So when I was at the theater with Jack, and this one also just, they carried the semblance of it and the same feeling of that reaching and that longing or whatever each of the pictures was, like the Burghers of Cassis from Rodin. But that particular one, the Napoleon, when I was at the Living Theater was a very important, notorious anarchist pacifist experimental theater company. And the woman who ran it was named Judith Malena. And she was, I mean, a prophet, to say the least. I mean, she was incredible. And what we did there was we made theater, but, you know, it was the beginning of theater happenings in the 50s and 60s. Like, you know, it was such an important place to be. And I did a play with her called The History of the World. And my part was playing Jacques-Louis David, the painter who made that painting. And throughout that play, I'm playing this artist and I'm this man. I'm in a very masculine role. And at the end of the play, as Judith always does, I transform into Venus, the goddess of love. So I take off my David costume and I become Venus. But that's my relationship to that painting. I don't know why it showed up in my sculpture, but it could have something to do with that.
What strikes me about tonight is so much has been about listening to materials as you make work, listening to the body, shaping it, and then listening to, I don't know it's too hard to name, but something spiritual among us and in community. And I'm really grateful for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for being
so much.
Kenny. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you guys for coming. Thank you.